bank was robbed by two masked white males, one armed with a sawed-off shotgun. According to the FBI, nearly $8,000 was taken by the bandits. Placed inside the money were 3 currency die cash packs, which exploded, sending red ink over the money, getaway car, and the bandits. The next day, Prattville police developed information that someone was spending ink-stained money in the area, and authorities were able to come up with a description of the subject and a tag number of the car he was driving. Montgomery police spotted the car at a local night spot and arrested Whiting with the help of the FBI and State Trooper narcotics agents. According to the FBI, Whiting allegedly had in his possession $271 in ink-stained money at the time of his arrest. He's currently being held on $100,000 bond. Officials are looking for a second suspect in connection with the robbery. Don Phelps, WSFA TV News.
Judge Paul Miller, Jr. considered evidence produced by the state charging that Sheriff A.B. Clark tampered with at least 25 members of a jury panel. Clark, through his lawyer Bill Baxley, accused the state of a smokescreen and said that there was never any attempt to tamper with any of the jurors. Clark was alleged to have ordered deputies on his staff to get jurors to say that they would vote not guilty no matter what the evidence showed.
A hearing on the motion lasted almost 3 hours. During the hearings, Judge Miller reportedly listened to taped recordings, tapes allegedly between Sheriff Clark and one of his deputies.
Right after lunch, Judge Miller announced his decision.
The court heard the evidence that was to be presented by the state and by the defendant in this case, and the court has overruled the motion to quash this venire, which means we will go ahead to trial.
That decision now sets the stage for jury qualification, which the prosecution says will be in favor of Clark because of alleged jury tampering.
The qualification procedures began shortly after Judge Miller ruled against the state. The presentation of evidence in this case is expected to take at least a day and a half. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News at the Houston County Courthouse, Dothan, Alabama.
The water shortage and outages caused by last week's severe winter storm. Waterworks officials say since last Tuesday, parts of the small town have been without water for at least 2 days. Now, residents must boil all water before cooking and drinking. Even though city officials feel the water is safe to consume, samples have been taken for laboratory tests at the State Health Department as a precautionary measure. City Waterworks Chairman Warren Aaron says so far the water shortage hasn't been a serious problem.
Well, it was bad, but now it's improving quite a bit. We've gained probably 70,000 gallons in the last 15 hours with the help of Talus, and of course our pumps are back on and operational now. So as far as the amount of water, we're gaining back. We're in pretty good shape.
Aaron says residents have been asked to use the precious liquid as sparingly as possible. Hopefully, water supply should be back to normal by week's end. Until then, National Guardsmen are supplying water from large tankers, but even that water must still be boiled before consumed. Kim Davis, WSFA TV News in Eclectic.
Alabama law, I didn't get into the legal aspect. The governor doesn't have the authority to commute sentences. For instance, if you was given 10 years.
It has come to the point where we are concerned about their health. We understand that the old lady, Mrs. Wilder, has virtually had a nervous breakdown, and this was an account of a visit made by one of the attorneys over the weekend, and it's sort of a sad situation, and we're going to meet with Governor James to see what the possibilities of putting them on work release.
During the hearing, Special Agent Robert Lee of the FBI testified that when the bandits fled the bank, 3 packets of money containing red dye exploded over the cash and the getaway car. The money taken from the bank included $1,500 in marked bills. Assistant Prattville Police Chief Alfred Wadsworth told the judge 4 $20 bills reportedly taken in the holdup were recovered in the Prattville area. Through witnesses, Prattville police were able to come up with a description of the man who passed the money and the car he was driving. Early the next morning, Montgomery police spotted the car at a local bar and Whiting was arrested. Agent Lee testified that Whiting had $271 in red-stained money on him when he was arrested. Whiting reportedly told Lee that he bought the roll of money from some unidentified man for $20. Lee also told the court that nearly $8,000 was taken in the robbery, and the bank surveillance cameras were not in operation at the time of the holdup. Whiting is currently being held on $100,000 bond. There were only a few new pieces of information brought out during the hearing. The FBI would not say if they're looking for one or two suspects in the robbery, but we have been able to learn that additional money taken in the robbery was recovered in Montgomery today. Reporting from the federal courthouse, Don Phelps, WSFA TV News.
As he has done with his other legislative packages, Governor James was on the road again, campaigning for them. Today, Governor James took his reform campaign to Auburn, where he talked with the faculty senate. They appeared receptive to a number of his reform ideas, including reforms to restructure the Alabama Commission on Higher Education, two-year junior and technical colleges, and the State Board of Education. But when it came time to talk about the governor's proposal to reduce teacher retirement benefits, the governor almost lost control of the audience.
Any disagreement with that?
The governor told the faculty members that his proposal to put what he calls some needed control in higher education, one of his top priorities during this regular session of the legislature, one of the reasons he's traveling the state on weekends to take his message to the people. This is not the first time Governor James has taken reform campaign packages to the people asking for their support. He did it last year during his series of special sessions. Earlier this morning, he was in Birmingham meeting with community leaders and businessmen asking for their support. And he says during the next month or so, he'll be on the road some more asking for support. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News, reporting from Auburn.
Hello, this is Russell. Jazz in the afternoon, sitting in for a trip of 12:44. We started off that second here, followed by.
When fire inspectors arrived this morning, the outside of People's Ice Warehouse looked much the same as it has since it was closed some dozen years ago. But inside, the walls and floor are covered with the charred remains of a fire that kept Atmore firemen busy all night. Atmore Fire Chief Charles Rutherford says a passerby reported the fire just after 7 o'clock last evening. That began an all-night battle to put the flames out. Rutherford says the biggest problem was thick cork insulation in the walls of the ice house that smoldered and sometimes burst into flames long after the initial blaze was extinguished. Both Rutherford and Deputy State Fire Marshal John Hammock say the fire was apparently started on purpose, perhaps by children playing with matches or by vandals. Rutherford says the thickly insulated walls of the ice warehouse proved both a blessing and a curse. Though they kept firemen on the scene all night, they also kept the fire from spreading. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News in Atmore.
In May of 1980, Captain Pete Peterson was the narrator for the Thunderbirds. He was one of the more experienced flyers. Captain Peterson had only one more year to serve with the Precision Flying Team. Each member flies for 2 years, but since Captain Peterson was a narrator, he was to stay with the group for 3 years, 1 as narrator and 2 as a pilot. When I talked with him back in 1980, he told me that the Thunderbirds undergo an intensive 3-month training session each year. He said they practice twice a day, every day, for 6 days each week. This afternoon's accident happened during one of those practice sessions when the pilots were trying a loop and tail maneuver. The Thunderbirds began their flying shows in 1953. Since then, 19 men have lost their lives, including the 4 pilots who were killed in this afternoon's accident, which Air Force authorities call the worst accident in the Thunderbirds' 29-year history. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
Mrs. Wilder was sentenced to 5 years, and Mrs. Bozeman was sentenced to 4 years, I believe, and they only been in prison about a week now. But for a person who has never been arrested in their lives, who has never been around any form of criminal activities, and to be thrown into a situation like that, especially at her age, 70 years old, it is a tremendous mental burden.
Local historians say A.B. Clark is the first sheriff in recent history to be elected to office 4 times in a row in Houston County. In his last campaign, A.B. Clark beat his runoff opponent by a large margin. Even though this is an election year, there's been no rumor of an opponent for Clark's position as Houston County Sheriff. Many local reporters have been reluctant to report anything that might appear to be negative about the sheriff. District Attorney Sorrells is keeping a low profile in the Clark case, recusing himself from the case. Why is Clark so popular? We asked a number of citizens that question, and we came up with one answer. A lot of people owe A.B. Clark a lot of favors. I was told that he makes time to help everybody, rich and poor, who may find themselves in trouble. Among the many things Clark does to endear himself to his supporters are fish fries and chitlin dinners. We were told everybody is invited, even those who are considered enemies. The state says Clark used his office and popularity for personal gain, and that he embezzled county funds and corruptly operated his office. Prosecutors know how popular Clark is, and today's ruling by Judge Miller is not expected to make their chances of getting a conviction against him any easier.
The results of our unofficial poll here on A.B. Clark reveals this, that most people here like him, and he would be re-elected if he ran again in this election year. And most of them say if they were on a jury, they would find him innocent no matter what the evidence was. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News, Dothan, Houston County, Alabama.
The team made the 23-hour drive by van. The trip, financed mainly by the players themselves, made college hockey history, as Auburn became the first college hockey team from the South to compete against the established teams of Canada and the United States. The tournament's host team, defending 2 national champs Canton, contacted Auburn in late November about the tournament. As Auburn arrived in Canton exhausted from the long drive, they were fortunate to learn that they would not be playing during the first day of competition. So after a brief rest, the team gathered at Appleton Arena for its first practice in 4 weeks. The players knew that the competition would be fierce and was thankful to get the extra ice time. But why would anyone invite a team from Alabama, a team that gets limited ice time at that, to a tournament that has some of the top college hockey teams in the country? Well, Coach Terry Martin says that some of his players are interested in going to school at Auburn, since Canton is only a 2-year school.
To be able to find additional schools for our student athletes to transfer to. And I know, speaking of at least Auburn University, I would certainly be pleased to have our students go on and continue their academic careers and continue to be able to play hockey for the last 2 years of college.
Auburn's first game was against a tough Erie College team, a team known for hard hitting rather than finesse, and many observers were anxious to see how Auburn would handle the hard-checking style of play. Tomorrow I'll continue my report of Auburn's historic trip to Canton, New York, with highlights of tournament play. Reporting from the North Country International Hockey Festival, Emery Stapleton, WSFA TV Sports. Even before the tournament started, Auburn's young hockey team realized they would have to play their best if they hoped to stay in the games and possibly pull off the biggest upset in their 3-year history. Skating with only 12 players, Auburn's hopes of victory rested on the shoulders of their 2 young goaltenders. If they could hold off the onslaught of shots on the Auburn goal, they might have a chance of winning. Auburn's first opponent was Erie College. They came out flying, living up to the hard-hitting style of play they're noted for. In period 1, Auburn held Erie to just 2 goals. But in the second period, Auburn started to tire, and Erie added 3 more. Auburn, not giving up, finally scored in period 3 and added another one before the game ended. Though Erie added 4 more goals in the final period, Auburn's netminder Ken Wills stunned the crowd, stopping 50 of 59 shots and being named the game's most valuable player. In Game 2, Auburn went up against the defending 2 national champs, Canton. Canton, perhaps the best skating team in the tournament, played an entirely different game than Erie, setting up plays before firing on the Auburn goal. At times, it seemed that goalie Mike Lee had little help in front of the net as Canton cashed in on Auburn mistakes. Auburn had several chances to score, but was just no match for the powerful Canton team. And as the final buzzer sounded, Auburn was happy to end the game with no injuries, though the 14-0 drubbing injured their pride. Now it was the final game, Auburn's last chance for a victory. This time the opponent was Centennial College of Toronto, their first Canadian foe. Once again, Auburn went with goaltender Ken Wills, and Auburn wasted no time in scoring, but Centennial came back with 3 unanswered goals before Auburn was able to light up the scoreboard again. Auburn skated hard until the lack of ice time began to take its toll during period 3, as Auburn fell once again, this time by a 12-4 margin. Although Auburn failed to post a victory, Auburn did leave its mark at the tournament, as goaltender Ken Wills was selected the tournament's outstanding player. Tomorrow, I'll continue my report on Auburn's first tournament and talk with some of the players and coaches about Auburn's program. Reporting from Canton, New York, Emery Stapleton, WSFA TV Sports. Auburn's first taste of Northern hockey was an experience the players won't forget, though the team would have enjoyed the tournament more had they come home with a victory. Still, the players were pleased that they were able to hold their own against stiff competition in most of the games. I talked with some of the team members about the tournament and how the experience will help the team the rest of the season.
Competition is great, and it's just an experience that playing down south that we can't get.
If we had just a little bit more depth, I know we could have done a lot better.
This competition up here is by far, head and shoulders above anything else we've seen in the last 2 years. It quickens your style 100%. It can only take so long before some people find out that we are the only winning team on campus. Let's face it, we're winning most of our games, and we're doing it out of our own. It's coming from us. We're not getting any support from anybody else.
As Auburn returned to league play this past weekend, they were able to increase their record to 9-1, defeating Georgia Tech twice. The Tigers have also placed themselves amidst a 3-way race for the SCHA crown, with Tennessee and Alabama Huntsville. But how good is Auburn's program? Well, Coach Terry Martin says a little more conditioning is separating Auburn from competing against established teams on a regular basis.
I don't think a lot of the finer skills of the game and individual skills that people have are really that there's that much differentiation between the 2 teams. Because we do skate 4 lines, and all 4 lines are fairly equal. You come up against a team that has 2 or 3 lines that we're going to wear them down just on our condition alone.
Though Auburn didn't fare as well as they would like to in the tournament, they did prove to the tournament officials that competitive hockey can be played in the South. Reporting from the North Country International Hockey Festival, Emery Stapleton, WSFA TV Sports.
Building a nest egg for the future has never been so easy or beneficial. Effective January 1st, tax breaks reward individuals who put up to $2,000 a year into IRAs.
People that are probably in a higher tax bracket would see the immediate advantage in that they can defer taxes from a higher tax bracket until they possibly in their retirement years when they would be taxed at a much lower bracket. That would be a good advantage for people in the middle age and so on up. As far as that goes, the younger people, they would have the advantage again in that they can start while they're young and contribute this maximum contribution, whatever, each year. And they in turn will see the advantage in the fact how much their account may grow in the long run.
The money that you contribute to an IRA is deductible from your income before calculating how much federal income tax you owe, even if you don't itemize any other deductions.
Kind of a delayed income tax is kind of the way we see it. and we feel like that maybe we can use that money in future more than we can right now.
The maximum you can deposit and claim on your federal taxes is $2,000. For example, a person who would otherwise have an annual taxable income of $28,000 would only have $26,000 after contributing the $2,000 to an IRA. IRAs can be beneficial to anyone, especially to those in higher income brackets, but there are some disadvantages as well.
If you have an IRA account with a bank or any institution, and you try to withdraw those funds prior to 59 and a half, you first may be subject to a bank penalty in that the funds have not matured at the bank. Also, if you withdraw these funds for personal use, the IRS expects a 10% penalty tax for withdrawing prior to the age 59 and a half.
Gina Gregory, WSFA TV News.
Those who knew Captain Pete Peterson say he always wanted to be a pilot, and his lifelong dream came true when he joined the Thunderbird Precision Flying Team in 1979 as the group's first black pilot. The following year, Pete worked as the team's narrator, and in 1981 flew as the team's right wingman, the position he held for this year's exhibition season, which was slated to begin in March. Kindergarten schoolmate and longtime friend, Tuskegee attorney Milton Davis was saddened when several other friends who, through the years, have always kept in touch, called with the news of their friend. Davis described Pete as a leader and friend.
And it was that close friendship as well as competitiveness, because we both wanted to be the best at what we did. And Pete would come by and visit with us when he was flying with the Thunderbirds at Maxwell Air Force Base. He would always come through Tuskegee and visit, and looked like he made a point of making sure he'd stop in and visit with me here.
Others like Minister Vernon Jones, whose daughter Cecilia married Pete, called him a good Christian man, father, and husband. Father Jones said he'd like the Tuskegee community and the world to remember Pete this way.
Someone who died doing what he wanted to do. He loved flying.
Memorial services for the 4 pilots is set for Thursday at Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada. Burial services for Captain Joseph Pete Peterson are incomplete, but family members say he'll be buried in a national cemetery. Kim Davis, WSFA TV News.
The verdict came after Judge Miller told the jury that the state of Alabama failed to prove that A.B. Clark used any criminal act to steal a truck from Dothan contractor Robert Cameron. The state attempted to prove that Clark seized the vehicle while performing his official duties after a small claims judgment was rendered against Cameron, and that Clark lied later to Cameron when the contractor tried to get the truck back. Bill Baxley, Clark's attorney, attempted to show, and apparently Judge Miller was convinced, that Cameron lost the truck through the courts, and that Clark later purchased it at an auction and not by stealing it in any manner from Cameron. The state called at least 5 witnesses today. The defense didn't call anybody. The defense attorney, Bill Baxley, said he didn't see any need to call any witnesses because the state didn't have a case anyway. He then asked that the case be thrown out by a directed verdict from the judge, declaring that the state had not proven its case. After Judge Miller studied the evidence for about 30 minutes, he instructed the jury to return a not guilty verdict. Houston County Sheriff A.B. Clark still faces additional criminal charges, and the state says it's prepared to try all of them. And A.B. Clark says he plans to fight all of them. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News at the Houston County Courthouse.
Wallace's comments came while addressing the 2nd annual meeting of Southern Milk Cells of Alabama. The former governor told the milk producers that the average worker is the one being hardest hit as a result of current economic problems. He says government leaders had better realize the impending danger and do something before it's too late.
They're the ones that pay the taxes, we are. We're the ones that produce the goods. We're the ones that fight the wars. And as a consequence, the existence of a strong middle class in this country that's grown up in the last several decades is today in danger of being done away with.
Wallace says he's praying Reaganomics will turn the slumping economy around. He says if the president's plan fails and the middle class is destroyed, there will only be 2 forms of society, the rich and the poor. Wallace also told the dairyman that the government must do whatever is necessary to keep the American farm, which he says is an endangered species, alive. Otherwise, he says, the American dollar will be worth a lot less in the near future than it is now. Dan Black, WSFA TV News.
That if you go back and do some research, you'll find that Moses, man, owned boats. And he said, can you build me a boat to carry to the Israelites?
And of the South Alabama State Fair Club, he was an officer. Andy Candler.
Had a staff member in my office to figure up, and there was some 232 separate and distinct budget cuts. Most of them, in my judgment, were needed and were a good. It was a good thing for them to occur. However, there were some that I didn't go along with, as is I think anyone. You couldn't find anybody that would agree.
Reed calls it a free campaign for the mayor. He's talking about an advertisement currently running on 3 state television stations to recruit policemen for the Montgomery Police Force.
Now the Montgomery Personnel Department is testing for a few openings.
Reed says with the mayor as a probable candidate for this year's gubernatorial race, the ads should stop at once. But Falmer spoke up quickly in his own defense, saying he could care less about Reed's opinion, that he's appeared in the ads for several years, that the ads have proved effective, and he will continue to appear in them. When asked by Council Chairman Willie Peake to keep his comments brief, Falmer said he would talk as long as Reed did, and told Peake, "You can bang your gavel all you want to." Later, Reed asked the mayor to apologize to Peake. The mayor laughed. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News.
Both houses spent quite some time trying to decide how they should handle budget isolation. The House decided that any bill could be voted on, and if passed by a simple majority, a resolution exempting that bill from isolation could be considered. But the Senate decided that the exemption resolution had to be considered before the bill was voted on. And the Senate ruled that all of these exemption resolutions go to the Senate Rules Committee before being transmitted. Tangled in this web of interpretation, the Senate finally adjourned before acting on any bills, and the House managed to consider a number of bills, passing only 3 statewide bills with the exemption tacked on. All the while, Representative Bob Gafford of Birmingham protested all of the interpretations, saying isolation doesn't apply to transmitting bills for consideration, only for signature of the bills by the presiding officers, which happens after each House has voted in favor of a bill. The one obvious reaction to the Budget Isolation Act? It kept legislators at their desks during consideration of local bills, which in the past were approved by a dozen or so votes. Today, local bills were getting 65 to 75 votes. That prompted the House to look into possible ways to circumvent the isolation measure as it relates to local bills. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
Danny, how's it going? Fine.
Heflin was uncertain, or at least he left unspoken, where he stands in relation to the Reagan White House. Although he says he hopes the Reagan programs work, he did not say whether or not he thought they would. He said the president's plan to balance the budget was a very good idea, but that the administration has called for a great deal of cuts. He said the Reagan economic plans are good, but high interest rates must come down if they're to work. He says he favors a buildup of what he calls a deteriorated military, and mentioned several plans to do just that. But he did not come out strongly in favor or against any of the plans. He says the nation can't continue to operate government at a deficit. but he's not sure where, when, or how money will come to end deficit spending. In all, it was a cautious speech, in which Heflin took only a very few hard stances. However, among those few was a prediction. It will be at least the middle of the summer before we'll know if the Reagan plans for economic recovery will succeed or fail. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News.
The man was loved, the man was idolized. The man had every just and noble gift. He took great burdens and he bore them well, believed in God, the laconic balance of that phrase. This man could read.
Steve McKinney should celebrate Robert E. Lee's birthday. It's appropriate that we...
The verdict came after one day's testimony and after defense attorney Bill Baxley asked that the judge throw the case out because there was no evidence that Clark had committed theft as charged in the indictment. After the jury returned the verdict, these were the comments from principals in the case. Judge Paul Miller.
The state did not prove the prima facie case. Thank you. Thank you.
Prosecutor Ray Acton.
A great hurt, great disappointment.
What's next?
But I have nothing but high regard and great respect for the judge who made the decision.
Defense attorney Bill Baxley.
Same thing's going to happen on the rest of the cases. The shame of it is it's mixed in with still some shame because by incompetence or for some worse reason than that, the state has indicted an innocent person.
And Sheriff A.B. Clark.
And like I said before, if I do something wrong, I'll resign, and I still mean that. And it's ridiculous that this has been drug up, like my attorney says, my family, my friends, and it's ridiculous, and I'm ready to fight them to the last inch.
Legal problems for Sheriff A.B. Clark may not be over yet. He still faces 5 additional criminal charges. When those cases are expected to come to court is not known at this time. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News, Houston County, Dothan, Alabama.
Governor James' press secretary, Wendy Level, says 2 black legislators told the governor of the situation of 69-year-old Julia Wilder and 59-year-old Maggie Bozeman last week. Since that time, the governor recommended that State Prison Commissioner Joe Hopper meet with the women's attorney Solomon Say and Macon County Sheriff Lucius Amerson to work out a situation where the 2 women will be placed in a work release program in Macon County. Level says 2 meetings have been scheduled, but both were canceled.
If the attorney will show Commissioner Hopper in writing that he has some kind of work for these ladies to do on a work release program, and if Sheriff Amerson will write to the commissioner that he will accept custody of the 2 women through the Macon County Jail, then at that point we feel like that the women can be transferred out of the facility that they're in to Macon County, and that whatever procedures that will follow with Pardons and Parole Board will go ahead and take place at the appropriate time.
After the meeting with the governor, the legislators seem to be pleased with the steps taken so far. Level says if the paperwork is completed within the next couple of days, Mrs. Wilder and Mrs. Bozeman could be released from Tutwiler Prison and start work in their new jobs by the end of the week. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
I'm Emory Falmer, Mayor of Montgomery, and we have a lot to be proud of. For the 3rd year in a row, Montgomery's crime rate has decreased. Our fine police
First appear that the taxpayers of Alabama, the taxpayers of Montgomery, are picking up some free campaign publicity. I think it's that the responsibility for
Council, ladies and gentlemen, you heard the reading of the resolution to drop the course of this stand. President. Have a motion to postpone to death. All in favor?
As people grow more and more concerned, rightfully, about the end product of education, it's going to be more and more the responsibility of educators and of educational institutions to help people understand exactly what their institutions are all about.
I worked on that one, $400 budget. They were a new board as of, back in 77 or 78. And I've just been living. Every year we, of course, have to renew all of those licenses. And then make renewal stickers over them to tell that their license. They're still carrying in there when it comes to money, so it's a great time to Well, they're requiring a master's degree with X number of clock hours.
The main limit on an IRA is that you can't contribute more than what you receive in on-the-job compensation. Also, you can't make contributions if your only income is from interest, dividends, or other non-employment sources. Experts say the key to benefiting from an IRA is to start early and contribute consistently. But there are no set rules on how often or how much you have to contribute. Banking institutions have their own rules on minimum deposits for opening IRAs. Here's an example of how IRAs work. A person who is now 40 years old and pays in $2,000 a year, compounded quarterly, would accumulate $164,000 by the time he or she reaches 65.
I had rather do something with my money that I feel like the interest would work for me, because my husband and I are at the age right now where we're kind of thinking about the next 10 years. I know you don't think I'm that old, but we want a little more income 10 years from now.
That you are tying your money up. Once you go into an individual retirement account, it's expected of you to leave it in there till you at least reach the age of 59 and a half. As far as the rates go, you can get a comparable rate through the IRAs now as you can any other type of money market certificate or whatever it may be. So there, you're not at a disadvantage at all in rates right now.
Some rules to remember when opening an individual retirement account. You must leave your money in the account until you're age 59 and a half. If you withdraw early, you'll be penalized and you'll have to claim the money as income. And while the money is in the account, you can deduct up to $2,000 from your federal income taxes. But when you withdraw at retirement, you'll have to pay taxes on the money at that time. Gina Gregory, WSFA TV News.
The association is mainly a lobbying group made up of people who want to see the Coosa River navigable from Mobile to Rome, Georgia. In the past, the association successfully acquired federal money to open the Alabama River from Mobile to Montgomery. Today, though, facing a possibility of losing federal funds, they met to reorganize and strengthen their lobby for the Coosa project, set to start next year. But the picture painted by state and federal authorities is gloomy. They talk of possible heavy taxes for waterway usage. They say the railways are accusing the waterways of receiving excessive government subsidies, leaving many association members asking the question, is this still an economically viable project? Part of the answer came from a Mobile Corps of Engineers spokesman involved in a recent 4-year study of the project. He says waterway usage has risen and promises to continue rising, meaning this is probably a good, strong investment. If that's true, then it's now a question of convincing the feds, a job that may not be easy. Senator Howell Heflin spoke to the group in the afternoon. He says for now the big concern must be for the Tennessee Tom Bigby waterway project.
because if the Tennessee Tom Bigby is defeated, then I think you can expect that there would be a tax on practically every water system throughout.
While a state spokesman says he's not sure what can or will be done to provide funds if the federal money doesn't come through.
So many times we hear words and talk and we shuffle papers. I do hope that our situation will not be that.
Both speakers say they're in favor of the project and hope it succeeds in the long run. But it's clear, as one association member put it, it's going to be a selling job from here on in. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News.
A controversial measure drafting a new method of property taxing called current use was given committee approval today. Sponsor Rick Manley denied charges by opponents of the bill that it would cut into local property taxes in supporting schools, and he denied that only large corporate landholdings would realize savings. He says small landholders will realize proportional savings. Last year, Governor James vetoed a nearly identical bill. Meanwhile, the House Ways and Means Committee took up the governor's proposed education budget, teacher and state employee pay raises. There wasn't any action on the bills because of extended public debate over funding a pay raise for lunchroom and support personnel at schools. The Senate Governmental Affairs Committee was packed with hundreds of nurses opposed to a bill that would prohibit the Nursing Board from regulating nursing programs at colleges and universities. The committee postponed action indicating it would scrap that idea. Governor James drew a loud ovation as he voiced support of the Nursing Board. Governor James also showed up at the Senate Education Committee, where he said he supported an effort to tighten control over public education textbook selections, saying the current system was slanted. But public education forces opposed the idea, saying the current selection process is adequate. That bill is set for a vote tentatively tomorrow morning. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
John Reynolds, Deputy Director of Personnel, says the proposed plan is more equitable than the current one, which is 30 years old.
The proposed current plan is a 15-step plan with equal 2.5% increments. And what does this mean to an employee?